A young couple drives along a wooded back road. Madly in love, this couple forces the world. Always one step ahead, always in the wind. On their way to a friend who would betray them. As they drive, they meet their end. An end one of them had foreseen and wrote about in a poem. But the laws fooled around, kept taking him down and locking him up in a cell, till he said to me, I'll never be free, so I'll meet a few of 'em in hell. The road was so dimly lighted, there were no highway signs to guide, but they made up their minds if all roads were blind, they wouldn't give up till they died. If they try to act like citizens and rent them a nice little flat, about the third night, they're invited to a fight by sub-guns rat-a-tat-tat. They don't think they're too tough or desperate. They know that the law always wins. They've been shot at before, but they do not ignore that the death is the wages of sin. Someday they'll go down together, and they'll bury them side by side. To few, it'll be grief. To the law, relief. But it's death for Bonnie and Clyde. Hello, I'm Nikki.
And I'm Jess.
She's the traumatized.
And she's the abandoned.
And
welcome to our 50th episode.
Where, we are going to be talking about a specific topic today.
Yeah, we are. We usually talk about true crime, spooky things, and everything in between. But today, we're talking about something very specific. And I'm excited about it.
Cat's out of the bag now. They know.
I was going to say, yeah, they know. Do they know that we know that they know? So yeah, we're talking about Bonnie and Clyde.
Bonnie
This
and
is your
Clyde.
idea. This is your idea. And I was like, that sounds like a perfect 50th episode story, because I didn't know the whole story about it.
Yeah, I learned a lot during this process.
Yeah.
And it's crazy story.
It's crazy. So crazy.
And it's still like such a phenomenon today. You still hear people referencing Bonnie and Clyde almost 100 years later. It's like 90 years.
Jeez, that's crazy to think about.
Right?
90 years ago. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, fun fact of the day.
Yeah. I think we should jump right into it. No, like chit chat.
Good.
It's a long one.
Do you want to know the fun fact of the day?
Yeah.
Did you know that kangaroos can't walk backwards?
Interesting.
Now you do.
That's crazy.
Keeping it short and sweet, because this one's long, so we're gonna.
I might have like dived it, and
bit.
I wouldn't say try. I mean, I thought about taking things out, but I'm like, nah, those are kind of important. I don't know. It was hard to even try and look at trying to take things out, but
yeah. I mean, because we did research. We just did like a dump research on Wednesday, right? And you went through and kind of like toned things down. Well, didn't tone things down. Added more things.
Well, I mean, same. I toned things down, added more things, just fine-tuned it, I guess, is what you would say.
I know we did like a dump of information on Wednesday, but it was not organized. It was chaotic and it was fantastic. Okay.
For the first time ever, you get to start.
I'm excited. I thought we switched it up at one point.
Huh?
Did we? One episode we switched it up?
I don't know. Did we? I don't know.
Maybe we talked about doing it. I don't know. Viewers and listeners, have I ever gone first? Let's think.
I don't think remember. Of a time.
I thought maybe no, because we didn't do it for April Fools. We just switched our voices.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, I'm going to go first. I'm excited. Are you ready?
So ready.
Okay. Bonnie and Clyde were considered the modern day Robin Hood for their time, but it wasn't the big men of the era that they repeatedly stole from. Instead, it was the hard-working Americans just trying to make their way through the Great Depression. And their crimes would include over a dozen murders.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. So the once romantically worshipped couple became vicious villains in the people's eyes. We're going to start a little adventure out talking about Bonnie. I'm going to talk about Bonnie, and then Nikki's going to talk about Clyde.
Yeah.
So, Bonnie Parker was born born in Rowena, Texas on October 1st, 1910 to Henry and Emma Parker. She had an older brother, Hubert, aka Buster, and a younger sister, Billy. Bonnie, Billy, and Buster.
Interesting.
I could never do that. I would just mess up their names all the time. Her father, who was a bricklayer, died in 1914, and Emma Parker moved the family to Cement City, an impoverished suburb in West Dallas, to live closer to relatives. Bonnie attended the local schools there and was a bright student who showed a keen interest in poetry and literature, earning honors in her studies, which obviously should continue to poetry because that's how we started our episode. Really big into that poetry. While she enjoyed writing poetry, she also enjoyed reading romance novels. I am with you on that. At 4'10" and 85 pounds and thought to be exceptionally pretty, she had dreams of becoming an actress. 4'10" and 80, that's so tiny.
Very tiny.
She hardly looked like a future legendary criminal. In 1926, she married her long-term sweetheart, Roy Thornton. Bonnie had Roy and Bonnie tattooed above her right knee to commemorate her marriage to Thornton. Why the right knee?
Also, like, never do that.
No.
Never tattoo your
Never.
significant other. Bad omen. Bad luck.
Yeah. The right knee.
Yeah, the right knee is maybe because she
Maybe
could
because he
hide
got
it under
down?
her skirts.
Oh. I was thinking maybe he got down on right knee to propose to her.
I doubt that.
Maybe to hide it. But why the knee then? Why not get it on your hip? Anyway, for the next several years, they suffered a turbulent marriage, with Thornton proving to be physically abusive. However, she refused to divorce him. In 1929, Thornton was sent to prison for 5 years for robbery, which is interesting. She might have a type. She might have a type. What's crazy to me is after he got sent to prison, they would never see each other again. And she just stayed married to him. Like, what? Thornton would later die during a prison escape.
Yeah.
So Bonnie worked at Marco's Cafe in Dallas until the cafe closed in November of 1929 due to the Great Depression. She then met Clyde in January 1930. However, their romance was interrupted when Clyde was sent to jail a month later.
For what? Wonder.
Robbery. No. So now we're going to talk a little briefly about Clyde.
So Clyde Barrow was born on March 24th, 1909 in Texas. He was the fifth of 7 children born into a poor but close-knit farming family. His family's farm failed due to drought, and they eventually moved to Dallas, Texas in the early 1920s as part of a wider migration pattern from rural areas to the city, where many settled in the urban slum of West Dallas. So the Barrows spent their first months in West Dallas living under their wagon until they got enough materials to build like a home. And I say that in quotation marks. So basically, Bonnie and Clyde grew up extremely poor. Clyde more so than Bonnie, but yeah. Clyde, who was a small and unassuming boy, attended school until the age of 16 and had ambitions of becoming a musician, learning to play both the guitar and saxophone. However, under the influence of his older brother Buck, Clyde soon turned to a life of crime, because that's just easier, isn't it?
I mean, if you don't get caught, maybe.
Maybe. Barrow was first arrested in late 1926 at age 17 after running when police confronted him over a rental car that he had failed to return on time.
Oh.
Which, why would you run for that? Because, I just misplaced my papers. I forgot the date. Like, I feel like that wouldn't have been a big deal, but he ran.
If he hadn't have ran, right.
His second arrest was with his brother Buck soon after for possession of stolen turkeys.
Sorry.
And something that we didn't incorporate in our notes, but the Barrows liked to steal chickens for chicken fights. And so very noisy crimes they like to commit.
Yeah, the chickens and the turkeys, like, they're not quiet beasts.
Like, let me just go steal a chicken. Obviously beginning with petty thievery, then graduating to stealing cards, Clyde soon escalated his activities to armed robbery. By late 1929, at the age of 20, Clyde was already a fugitive from the law, wanted by authorities for several robberies. And it's around this time that he met Bonnie through a mutual friend, and they were immediately smitten with each other. But Their budding romance was interrupted when Clyde was arrested and convicted on various counts of auto theft. He was transferred to Waco, where he confessed to several burglaries and car thefts. He was sentenced to 2 years for each count, with the sentences running alongside each other. So once in prison, Clyde's thoughts turned to escape immediately. By this time, he and Bonnie had fallen deeply in love, and a lovesick Bonnie was more than willing to help a man she called her soulmate. And soon after his conviction, she smuggled a gun into the prison for him. And how she got the gun in is actually quite an interesting story. So Bonnie was actually staying in Waco while Clyde was in prison there, and she would visit him almost daily. So that day, she had already visited him, and Clyde's like, yo, go get this gun from my cellmate's dad's house. And so Bonnie left the prison, went and got the gun, and she hid it under her skirt. Like, I think she strapped it to her thigh or something. And she figured she wouldn't get searched because she hadn't before. And, you know, Bonnie was a very, what's that word? She was a very charming person.
Okay.
So she walked in through security, no problems, charming the guards, gun on thigh, and gave it to Clyde. And
wow.
Yeah, crazy.
Hey guys, if a man ever asks you to sneak a weapon into a jail, maybe he's not the right one for you.
Maybe we
the
should
fact that he's in
make
jail.
better choices.
Make better choices. You are so much better than that. You know what I mean? Like, you deserve so much better than that. So,
facts.
PSA for the day.
And then on March 11th, 1930, Clyde used the weapon to escape with his cellmates, but they were captured a week later, and Clyde was then sentenced to 14 years of hard labor, eventually being transferred to Eastham State Farm, and that is where Clyde would be changed forever. So I think this is like the pivotal moment of Clyde's life of, I mean, honestly, he probably would have chosen a life of crime either way, but I think this is what caused him to escalate.
Yeah.
So once at Eastham, Clyde was, for some reason, grouped with the worst of the worst. And Clyde, being a small man, would be repeatedly sexually assaulted by an inmate. After over a year of this abuse, Clyde came up with a plan. He made his way to the bathroom where he knew the inmate would follow him, and when the inmate did, Clyde grabbed a pipe he had stashed and swung it at the inmate's head, killing him. Then another inmate, spending life in prison already, jumped on the body, stabbed it multiple times, and even himself to make it look like a knife fight, and he took the hit for the murder. The official record said that the inmate died to a lost knife fight despite the major damage to his head.
Like, by a pipe.
Like, I feel like that's something you would notice, but
yeah.
I feel like also at this prison, like, the guards did not give a fuck. They're like, another one dead. Yeah, because they were very abusive, and, you know, they probably killed inmates themselves.
Yeah.
So a couple months go by, and in order to avoid hard labor, Clyde had someone chop one of his big toes off. Because of this, Clyde would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. And, like,
why the big toe?
That was
why not
a
like
very bad
the
idea.
Middle toe, or like,
because you need your big toes. Big
toes
toes
it's
are
balancing.
important.
It's how you balance. Why the big one? Why not the pinky?
Why not the pinky toe?
It's already like mine's like half the size of my other toes, so why not? You know. I mean,
but with chopping off the pinky toe of avoid hard labor,
probably not.
So.
Probably not.
But anywho, due to that, he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life, obviously.
Silly man.
However, this wasn't even necessary, because just 6 days later, he would be released on parole due to his mother successfully petitioning for his release.
6 days later.
Crazy.
You had a really easy 6 days. He was still probably in the infirmary from chopping off his big toe.
Probably. He limped out on crutches, I think.
Jesus. What an idiot. Okay. Alrighty. Now we're going to talk about how their budding romance really began.
Yeah.
So, as mentioned above, Clyde met and fell in love with Bonnie Parker while visiting a friend in West Dallas in January of 1930. She soon became aware of his criminal background when he was arrested, taken to Denton, Texas for questioning about stolen merchandise. So, kind of just recapping what we just heard.
Mhm.
So while Clyde was in Waco waiting for a transfer to Eastham, Bonnie visited almost daily, and Bonnie wrote to him pleading with him to stay out of trouble upon his release. So he was released in February of 1932, more bent on destruction than ever before, and Bonnie was more determined than ever to prove her loyalty to him, even to the extent of assuming his manner of living. Upon his release, Bonnie and Clyde began robbing grocery stores, filling stations, and small banks. In March 1932, Bonnie was captured in a failed robbery attempt and jailed in Kaufman, Texas, where she passed time writing poetry on any bits of paper she could find. Somehow, those were smuggled out of jail, and that's why we can read them to this day.
And if you're interested, you can find them online. Heads up, they're extremely long. So if you've got time, go ahead and read them. But they're like so, they're like a book, a poem, like a book for just one poem. It's insane.
Lord. During the robbery, it was alleged that Clyde murdered merchant J.W. Butcher of Hillsborough on April 27th, 1932, though it was also said that he was just the getaway driver.
So whichever one you believe, he did.
Hearsay. Not speculation. On June 17, 1932, a grand jury met in Kaufman and failed to indict Bonnie, thus securing her release. Within a few weeks, she connected with Clyde, and once again, they were on the run. The couple attended a dance, and Clyde, along with two others, were drinking moonshine in the parking lot when they were approached by two officers in Springton, Oklahoma. Clyde and another man decided to open fire, killing one officer and wounding another. They also... Oh, go ahead.
This is just crazy to me. Like,
we're just drinking moonshine, just gonna whip out your gun and start shooting
yeah,
people.
like what the heck? Why?
Why not? You know? No, not why not. Not why not, guys. Come on. They also gunned down a grocery store owner in Sherman, Texas, a citizen in Temple, and another law officer in Dallas. At this point, they are officially wanted by the police.
I mean, yeah. Can't get away with murder like that.
No, you're just straight up murdering police officers and citizens. And you're just, yeah.
Jumping into the Barrow Gang. So in 1932, Bonnie and Clyde first began traveling with Raymond Hamilton, a young gunman. Hamilton left them several months later, but then was replaced by William Daniel Jones in November of 1932. And this story is actually kind of funny, kind of sad because someone does die, but WD, who had been a friend of the Barrows family since childhood, would become kind of like their first official member. Before this, they were kind of just roaming with random people. This is when they actually start building their own gang. And WD didn't actually want to be a part of the gang, but Clyde had convinced him to try and steal a car. And while WD was attempting and miserably failing at trying to steal this car, the owner of the car saw them and started to approach them. And Clyde just whipped out his gun, shot and killed the man, forcing WD to join them on the run. Crazy.
Well, you're one of us now.
Yeah, you gotta come with us now. For a while, the gangs swept through the Southwest, challenging the law by stealing cars and robbing in Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Missouri. Their robberies never really amounted to a lot of money, the most being about $3,000 when they robbed First State Bank of Willis, Texas. Which is it's just so crazy how they just went on these robberies, but they were very inexperienced and like very unplanned robberies.
Yeah, for sure.
They then traveled the Midwest, knocking over rural stores and gas stations from Minnesota to Texas along the way. So they would go as far north as Minnesota to commit these robberies.
Wow.
Buck Barrow was released from the Texas State Prison on March 23rd, 1933, having been granted a full pardon by the governor, and he quickly joined Clyde, bringing along his wife Blanche, so the group now numbered 5 people.
Wow.
Come on, honey.
Poor Blanche.
we got
poor
things
Blanche.
to do. The gang stayed ahead of law enforcement for as long as they did by moving quickly and being armed to the teeth. They also exchanged cars often, and they had license plates. They would always switch their license plates, switch their cars.
Okay, so they're being kind of smart about it.
Yeah,
sort of.
They also chose cars with powerful engines that could cover a lot of ground, and this made them extra evasive during a time when there was little communication or cooperation among among different law enforcement agencies, especially across the state lines, because I think at this point the FBI is like very new, if not. So like there was no communication between the 8 different agencies. And back then the police could not follow you once you cross the state line. So you could just drive across the state line and like they can't follow you to catch you. Yeah.
Okay.
When they did face off with police, the gang came out on top thanks to gun superiority, because Clyde would choose, instead of robbing money for guns, he would just go to the source and rob National Guard armories. Which is also insane to me.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
I mean, I guess he's kind of smart. Like, skip the middle part and just go for the guns. But
just
like,
go straight for the guns.
Also, you would think a National Guard armory would be guarded,
right? Like with those guns that are in there. Yeah.
Like, what? So the cops would be armed with service revolvers or pump guns, and they were met with full auto .30 fire M1918 bars.
Was that 1918?
M1918 bars, which is like basically an automatic rifle. And then a semi-automatic shotgun blast and 45 ACP rounds from semi-auto M1911 handguns. So while the bar rounds shredded anything police could use for cover, the steel bodies of the V8 Fords that Clyde preferred deflected handgun bullets and 45 slugs from Thompson machine guns. So they were just outmatched in every way.
Jeez. All right. So the gang made their way to Joplin, Missouri, where they rented a garage apartment on April 1st, 1933. And this would otherwise be known as the Joplin Hideout. It is said that they spent 13 days here partying, drinking, and planning their next course of action.
Because I think at this time is when Prohibition ended. So they were like buying
so like
cases of beer and drinking and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
When Clyde was cleaning his gun, it accidentally went off, and the neighbors alarmed the police.
Okay, like first things first. When you clean your gun, you empty it. You empty your gun before you even start cleaning it.
And then you check it, and then you check it again just to make sure. Like,
so insane.
I mean, but in what world are these guys responsible? Let's be real. Like,
that's so true. Like, these are kids. I think that's what you forget sometimes as you're reading their murdering and robbing, and so they're kids. They're 20-year-olds. Like
while you're reading the murder and robbing, you're like, you forget, but then when you read something like that, you're like, kids.
They're just kids.
Like how infatuated Bonnie was with Clyde. That gives off like she's in her early 20s.
Yeah.
Like, she's just completely and utterly in love, doesn't have a care in the world, just really wants to like be with this guy, wants to impress him, and just like, sweetie,
no,
you could do so much better. Stop. So the police assembled a 5-man force in 2 cars on April 13th to confront what they suspected were bootleggers.
Little did they know.
Little did they know. The Barra brothers and Jones opened fire, killing Detective Harry McGinnis outright and fatally wounding Constable J.W. Harringman. Bonnie opened fire with the... Is it a BAR or is it a bar?
That's how...
I think it's a BAR.
Yeah, Lag Pasca... You know what I'm talking about. They said BARs.
I think it's a BAR. Yeah. So Bonnie opened fire with a BAR as the others fled, forcing Highway Patrol Sergeant G.B. Collar to duck behind a large oak tree. After everyone got to the Ford truck, they roared the engine and fled the scene. Clyde went soaring through the garage door, and he was able to smash right through the blockade. Not a great blockade.
Obviously.
Bonnie got into the car with the others, and they pulled in Blanche from the street where she was pursuing her dog, Snowball. Snowball ran away. Yeah. Unfortunately. It says unfortunately, but is it unfortunately?
I mean, he probably found a nice family.
Snowball's lived his best life not being pursued by all these crazy people. So Snowball probably got the best
out of everybody. I mean, honestly, when we get to the end, you see, Snowball got the best life.
Got off lucky here.
Very lucky.
The group escaped police at Joplin, but left behind most of their possessions at the apartment, including Buck's parole papers that were 3 weeks old, a large arsenal of weapons, and a handwritten poem by Bonnie. Of course, there was a poem.
Of course.
As well as a camera with several rolls of undeveloped film.
Ooh.
So police developed the film at the Joplin Globe and found many photos of Barrow, Parker, and Jones posing and pointing weapons at one another. One wonders how it took so long for them to get caught and not accidentally shoot each other.
Right.
So the Barrow gang subsequently became front page news throughout America. With their new notoriety, their daily lives became more difficult as they tried to evade discovery. Obviously, the more popular you get, people start recognizing you on the street, you know?
Yeah. And those pictures are like super famous. Like they like boosted them into famedom.
Famedom.
Yeah.
Fandom?
Fandom?
Could be fandom too.
Into fame.
Fame. The group ranged from Texas as far north as Minnesota for the next 3 months, committing robberies and sometimes kidnappings. Because that's how you stay below the radar.
I never knew that they would just kidnap their victims or police officers and just like hang out with them for like multiple days. Like what?
Yeah, wild. Between 1932 and 1934, they would kidnap police officers or robbery victims. They usually released their hostages far from home, sometimes with money to help them return. Almost all kidnapped victims would comment how considerate and nice Bonnie and Clyde were. Though some would comment on Bonnie's severe potty mouth. They have not met me.
But yeah, that's so crazy. Like they would be friends at the end of their kidnappings. And like maybe that's just severe Stockholm syndrome, but
or like, maybe they were just kids.
And yeah.
Then they also murdered a lot of people.
I have so many conflicting emotions when it comes to these two.
Yeah. Stories of such encounters made headlines, as did the more violent episodes. The Barlow gang did not hesitate to shoot anyone who got in their way, except for those they took hostage, apparently. Eventually, the cold bloodiness of their murders opened the public's eyes to the reality of their crimes and led to their end.
So with the photos, it became like super popular, super famous. And then as stories started coming back of all their murders and like the crimes they were committing, the public was like, oh, so maybe no.
They're not. I mean, so we know, like, we did the research. We know what they did. And we're still conflicted.
Yeah.
I was like, we still hear about, it's like, at least they were nice to their,
at least they were nice to their kidnapped victim.
To their kidnapper. And they set him free with money to get home, but also murder. Like, so yeah, I mean, I could understand why people would be conflicted, as we are conflicted now.
So the next thing that Jess is going to talk about is actually a very important aspect to the story that I had no idea even happened.
I didn't either. So there's a car crash. And this was definitely like a turning point. So while speeding in the middle of the night, Clyde missed a detour that had been set up for a bridge that was under construction. You are obsessed with bridges and destruction and falling apart.
Why is it my fault that this is how they just plunged off an empty bridge?
She chose this story because there was a bridge crash. All comes out now.
That was my main purpose. I wanted you guys to fear more bridges.
This is also terrifying because imagine you miss a detour sign and then
it's the middle of the night. They did not see that the bridge was not there anymore.
Yeah. So, well, that and the car blew through the wooden barricades and crashed and flipped into the ravine below. So the bridge was just gone. Clyde and WD were uninjured and retrieved the weapons from the wreckage. A spark ignited the leaking fuel and started to burn Bonnie, who was pinned underneath the car. Now, it was also said it was either a battery exploded or battery acid that burned Bonnie.
Yeah.
What you want. It was one of those two.
Also, what's insane, they just plunge off a bridge, flip over, and crash. And it's not like their cars have any safety measures of any kind like our cars do today.
Right.
Like, two of them just come out uninjured is insane to me.
They were built stronger.
That's true.
Like, they were built a lot heavier and a lot stronger. Like, the frame of the car was like a lot lot stronger than it is now. But we also have a lot more safety measures. So I think they kind of balance each other out.
Also, the burn got rid of that tattoo. So, bonus?
We hadn't gotten there yet. Actually, I don't know if I knew that.
It's not in there. I don't think I put that in there.
Well, her leg was extremely burned. Some reports say it was right to the bone. So, bye-bye tattoo.
Yeah, ouch. Also, just fucking ouch.
As a result of the third-degree burns, Bonnie, like Clyde, walked with such a pronounced limp for the rest of her life, and she had such difficulty walking at times, she hopped or needed Clyde to carry her.
Yeah, so it's like, because obviously they didn't go to a hospital.
Right. How do you go to a hospital?
Right. So like her leg necessarily didn't heal properly. It kind of healed.
Like scar tissue is
Yeah,
really
like
tight, actually.
Yeah, so tight and so I don't think she could like straighten her leg out properly anymore.
That makes sense. Ugh. The three rendezvoused with Buck and Blanche and hid in a tourist court near Fort Smith, Arkansas, nursing Parker's burns. Buck and Jones bungled a robbery and murdered the town marshal, Henry D. Humphrey, in Alma, Arkansas. The criminals had to flee despite Bonnie's grave condition.
Are idiots.
Botched a robbery, basically. Yeah.
Oh, I don't think you're ready for this part.
I'm never ready.
So, in July 1933, the gang checked into the Red Crown Tourist Court south of Platte City, Missouri, which I think is like a hotel kind of place. It consisted of 2 brick cabins joined by garages, and the gang rented both, which was a huge risk. They usually tried to stay away from hotels or motels because, you know.
Well, they keep track of stuff.
Yeah. So the owner, Neil Hauser, noted that the driver backed into the garage gangster style for a quick getaway.
Gangster style. Every time I back into somewhere, I'm going to be like, gangster style.
Blanche paid for their cabins with coins rather than bills and did the same later when buying 5 dinners and 5 beers. Also, another thing, Blanche has said there were 3 people staying in the cabins when the owner obviously saw 5 people going in and out. And obviously the 5 dinners and 5 beers. So the next day, Hauser also noticed that his guests had taped newspapers over the windows of their cabin.
Oh, guys. Come on.
Tell me you're criminals without telling me you're criminals.
They're young.
Blanche again paid for 5 meals with coins. Eventually, Hauser told Captain William Baxter of the Highway Patrol, a patron of his restaurant, about the group. He's like, yo, I got this weird group of people staying in my cabins. You might want to check them out. And when Barrow and Jones went into town to purchase bandages, crackers, cheese, and atropine sulfate to treat Bonnie's leg, the pharmacist contacted Sheriff Holt Coffey, who put the cabins under surveillance.
Okay.
So, Sheriff Coffey led a group of officers toward the cabins at 11 p.m. armed with Thompson machine guns. In the gunfight that ensued, the 45 caliber Thompsons proved no match for Barrow's 30 caliber BAR stolen on July 7th from a National Guard armory in Enid, Oklahoma. So the gang escaped when a bullet short-circuited the horn on the armored car of the police officers, and the officers mistook it for a ceasefire signal.
Oh, come on.
So they did not pursue the retreating Barrow vehicle. So the gang had evaded the law once again, but not without a cost. Buck had been wounded by a bullet that blasted a large hole in the bone of his forehead and exposed his injured brain.
Ew.
And Blanche was nearly blinded in both eyes by glass fragments.
Oh no.
Crazy. So the Barrow gang camped at Dexfield Park, an abandoned amusement park near Dexter, Iowa, on July 24th. Buck was sometimes semi-conscious and he even talked and ate, but his massive head wound and loss of blood were so severe that Clyde and WD dug a grave for him. And they even gave him a final meal of fried chicken. He's like, yo, I want some fried chicken as my last meal. But Buck didn't die.
How did Buck not die?
I have no idea. It's said that they dumped some type of, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but what you put in wounds or whatever, they dumped that in his open brain and somehow that like kept him alive. Also for Blanche, like the glass in her eyes, they tried picking out the big pieces, but like awful.
No. No.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Eventually, the gang was noticed and surrounded. A posse opened fire. Like they didn't even try anymore. And the gang returned fire with their BARs. The posse retreated under the heavy fire, giving the gang time to attempt an escape. They all piled into one car. Clyde was hit in the shoulder, though, by a bullet and ran the car over a tree stump. Unable to free the car, they fled to their other car, but it had been shot up by the posse and would not run. So Bonnie, Clyde, and WD took off on foot, leaving Blanche and Buck on their own.
Okay.
So Buck and Blanche Barrow were captured by the Dexter posse. Buck had been severely wounded, being shot multiple times during this, like in the back of the chest. Just he's full of bullet holes at this point. He's still alive, by the way. There is a famous picture of the pair being captured, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can probably see it right now. As the cameraman raised his camera, Blanche, basically blind because of the glass in her eye, thought it was a gun and screamed for her life, thinking it was like the end. But that produced that famous photo of her and Buck. Buck was taken to a hospital and he died 5 days later because of pneumonia, with probably the gunshots being a contributing factor.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
insane to me that
is actually insane that he lasted that long too.
Shot that many times and pneumonia is what took him out. Crazy. Blanche was eventually taken back to Missouri and tried for her part in the Platte City shootout, and we'll talk about that at the end.
All right, now we're gonna talk about the prison
Beginning
break.
of the end.
Beginning of the end. Okay. So on January 16th, 1934, 5 prisoners, including former partner Raymond Hamilton, who was serving sentences totaling more than 200 years, were liberated from Eastham State Prison Farm at Waldo, Texas by Clyde Barrow, accompanied by Bonnie Parker.
So one thing that I don't think we mentioned at all before, the whole reason behind Clyde's crime spree, Clyde and Bonnie's crime spree, is to do this prison break. Once he left Eastham, his only thought was revenge on Eastham. He wanted to raid Eastham and make them pay for what he had to go through.
Right.
So that's why all of his crimes are like petty. They didn't really get that much money because that really wasn't his goal. His whole goal was this.
We're here.
We're here.
So 2 guards were shot by the escaping prisoners with automatic pistols, which had previously been concealed in a ditch by Barrow. As prisoners ran, Barrow covered their retreat with bursts of machine gun fire. Among the escapees was Henry Methvin of Louisiana, who is important to the story a little bit later on. One of the couple's most blatant murders occurred on Easter Sunday, 1934, on the outskirts of Grapevine, Texas. According to a witness, a Ford halted along a public highway. The occupants of the vehicle, laughing and talking among themselves, tossed whiskey bottles out of the windows. When 2 highway patrolmen stopped their motorcycles to check on the quote-unquote stalled vehicle, the people in the car leveled guns at the officers and opened fire. Bonnie reportedly walked over to one of the officers, rolled him over with 1 foot, raised her sawed-off shotgun, and fired 2 more shots point blank at the officer's head and exclaimed, "Look there." His head bounced just like a rubber ball. This eyewitness's ever-changing story was soon discredited, but the massive negative publicity increased the public clamor for the extermination of the Barrow gang.
Yeah, another thing about the Barrow gang is if there was just like an unsolved murder or unsolved crime, they would just attach it to the Barrow gang because they could. And a lot of their crimes were like overly exaggerated. So I just want to put that in there. It could be true. It could not be true. We just don't know.
It could be hearsay.
It's hearsay for sure.
Could be. Also, it's one of those things that makes you be like, oh, what a bitch. Then it's like, I mean, they did murder
people.
They murder did happen.
They're not innocent by any means, but
no.
it was said that Bonnie never committed murder. Like she wasn't she wasn't about the murder, but that could also be hearsay. Like we just don't know.
We just don't know. The outcry galvanized the authorities into action and would contribute to the start of the end of the Barrow gang. Less than a week later, on April 6, 1934, Parker and Barrow committed their last murder by killing a constable in Commerce, Oklahoma, making it 12 murders in total that they had committed. They also abducted a police chief whom they wounded. Police chief ended up surviving, which again, I don't know in what world like they choose like who survives, who dies.
Yeah, I don't know. So the ending. The prison raid at Eastham was the beginning of the end for the Barrow gang because the Texas Department of Corrections contacted former Texas Ranger Captain Frank Hammer and persuaded him to hunt down the Barrow gang. He was retired, but his commission had not expired, so he accepted the assignment. Hammer went on the hunt on February 1st, 1934, joining forces with retired Texas Ranger Manly Galt. Hammer studied the gang's movements, surmising that the outlaws moved in a circle around Dallas, Texas, Joplin, Missouri, and northwest Louisiana, making a point to stay close to state lines. Frank knew Clyde would not be taken alive and understood the necessary actions to stop the pair. Another thing that I kept out of the story, but I'll mention here real quick, the Clyde and Bonnie actually took many trips home to visit family. Family was very important to them, and so they would actually like go home and visit every once in a while. And they actually almost got caught doing one of those times, but they just drove right past. Anywho, in the next few months, Bonnie, Clyde, and Henry Methvin robbed banks in Texas, Oklahoma, and Iowa. So Henry kind of joined the gang after his whole prison release thing.
Okay.
All while Hammer was always following close behind. Barrow was consistent in his movements, so Hammer charted his path and predicted where he would go. The gang's itinerary centered on family visits, like I said, and they were due to see Methvin's family in Louisiana. So Hammer led a posse composed of 6 men, consisting of the 2 of them and then Texas and Louisiana officers. So 2 former Texas Rangers, 2 Texas officers, and 2 Louisiana officers. The key was Ivy Methvin, Henry Methvin's father. Ivy wanted to save his son, so he made a deal to help get Bonnie and Clyde if his son was given immunity from prosecution.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. The moment.
Before dawn on May 23rd, 1934, the officers set up an ambush in some pines and brush along a rural road near Gisborne, Louisiana, along the route Bonnie and Clyde were expected to take. Ivy Methvin had been instructed to park his truck along the berm on the far side of the road in front of the hidden officers and remove one of his truck wheels while the posse concealed themselves in the bushes. It was hoped that when Bonnie and Clyde approached the truck, they would recognize it and stop to see if Ivy needed assistance. It was then that Captain Frank Hammer and his posse would make the arrest. The plan was to take Bonnie and Clyde alive if possible.
I mean, I don't think that was the plan because earlier he's like, I know what has to be done to stop them. So like, was it the
he knew that they wouldn't be taken alive
to arrest them, or did they just say that so they wouldn't get in trouble?
Like, yeah, because it's hard, right? Because they've murdered multiple police officers.
And they're armed to the teeth.
So do you give them a chance to surrender? That is a conundrum.
That is a moral choice.
That is a moral choice that I am very glad I do not have to. That's the moral choice of like saving 1 versus saving 100. It's like, do you kill the 1 to save 100? You're still killing somebody. But how many lives are you saving by killing that person? I'm just glad I don't have to make that choice. Anyway. At approximately 9:15 on May 23rd, the posse was still concealed in the bushes and they heard a vehicle approaching at high speed. The vehicle proved to be a Ford V8 with Barrow at the wheel, and he slowed down as hoped. It is unknown why, but it is said that one of the officers opened fire before the order was given. He shot Clyde in the head, killing him instantly. Bonnie's scream was said to haunt the men for years after. After this, the rest of the posse opened fire, emptying their weapons into the car, pumping about 167 bullets and buckshot into the car.
I mean, okay, at what point is too much? Like, at what point is, like, it too much? Too far?
Yeah.
Like, I get it, but, like, really?
Here's the thing for me. The whole Bonnie scream was said to haunt the men for years to come. I think that's romanticizing it a little bit. Because you think about it. President Kennedy was shot like in a parade, right?
Yeah.
I could see that being said about like his wife who was sitting right beside him.
Mm-hmm.
But like this, like I feel like that's romanticizing it. But I mean,
but also like you have to think about how infatuated Bonnie was.
exactly.
And then all of a sudden he's dead next to you.
Right.
Like,
right.
What is your reaction gonna be?
Yeah. But also he's a piece of shit who murdered a lot of people.
Not to Bonnie.
It's true. This is a moral. I was not ready for this today. Okay, well, it's not going to get any better. Bonnie Parker was found riddled with bullets, holding a machine gun, a sandwich, and a pack of cigarettes. Clyde Barrow, barely recognizable, was clutching a revolver. Bonnie was only 23 years old and Clyde was 24, which is
crazy.
That's wild to me.
Crazy.
As a result of his relentless expert detective work, Captain Frank Hammer was hailed as a national hero, while some others may question his methods.
Also, a side note, by the way, the posse totally didn't help Ivy put his tire back on his truck. They just left him there.
No, really?
Yeah.
That's fucked. That's so messed up.
So
that's messed up.
Right?
They just used him and left?
Yeah.
Yikes.
So the aftermath. The scene of Bonnie and Clyde's death quickly descended into chaos, as it would. The car was taken to Arcadia, Louisiana, and the bodies were later delivered to Dallas. But thousands viewed the mangled bodies and the car of the legendary lovers because they towed the car with the bodies still inside.
Which is wild to me. That's wild to me.
Yeah, townspeople rushed to the scene as the car was being towed with the bodies inside. Just crazy. More than just a look, people wanted some type of souvenir. Someone grabbed Bonnie's red hat off her head. I even saw stories of them cutting her hair off, like pieces of her hair. And someone else tried to cut off part of Clyde's ears, but like, why his ear?
Because it was probably the easiest thing to reach.
Maybe. I don't know. Crazy.
Well, you tried to take a finger? Like the fingers were
Oh
inside
yeah,
the
they
car.
tried
You know
to
what I mean?
take
If
a
his-
finger too. Like, stop. That's so crazy to me that people just wanted pieces of their bodies. Like, weird.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be that weird.
Well, that's why they have to like hide where like mass murderers are buried because people like worship them. You know what I mean? Like serial killers.
That's so
Like they have to hide where
gross.
they're buried because people worship them and like
Stop.
make altars using their bodies.
Stop. Just stop.
Fuck it. It's weird. People are weird.
Weird. The bodies were taken to a local funeral home operated in the back of a furniture store in nearby Arcadia, Louisiana. It's ironic to note that the undertaker Dillard Darby and his assistant Sophia Stone had actually been kidnapped by Bonnie and Clyde earlier. Bonnie laughed when she found out that Darby did what Darby did for a living and said that, who knows, one day you might work on us.
Oh my god.
This is like crazy.
You did. Wild.
Darby indeed involved their bodies, although not without some difficulties.
No.
The bodies had so many bullet holes, Bonnie having 26 and Clyde having 17, that the embalming fluid just kept leaking out. Like, gross.
That's so gross.
Didn't they have open caskets?
Yeah, they did.
Ew.
They did.
Okay, we'll talk about that
We're
later.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that later.
just realized that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The family.
Like the first sentence
Yeah.
of mine. You're stealing my lines.
Sorry. The families were notified, and the Barrow family sent an ambulance to deliver Clyde bodies to the authorities, who released it to the family. Clyde's father and Clyde's brother, Jack, had Clyde's remains sent to the Sparkman Holtz Brand Funeral Home in West Dallas, and Bonnie's body was sent to McCamey Campbell Funeral Home in South Dallas.
So the funerals. My first line. Did you know that Bonnie and Clyde both had open casket funerals?
Why? Like, oh my god. Like,
But both funeral parlor employees are to be commended for somehow making the bodies look presentable enough so that they could have open casket funerals. Because that, good
were
on them.
they shot
You know what I
in
mean?
the face? Because they said that Clyde was unrecognizable. Yeah, he was
Clyde
shot in the
was
head, right?
In the head,
Yeah.
for sure. I don't know if we had confirmation of Bonnie being, but I know Clyde was.
Crazy.
Bonnie and Clyde were buried in their individual families' burial sites. It was Bonnie's mother, Emma Parker, who prevented them from being buried together. Emma had never liked Clyde, and the thought of him having a bad influence over her daughter. Clyde's family had asked if she would like a double funeral and told her that there was room next to Clyde for Bonnie's body, but she would not hear any of it. This is the quote that I have. I have said that I will not permit Bonnie and Clyde to be buried together. He had her for 2 years, and look what he did to her. So Clyde was buried next to his brother, Buck. To this day, there is an empty spot next to Clyde's grave for Bonnie. If somehow, someday, her body can be moved.
Crazy.
Wild.
Wow.
What's interesting to me, far more people lined up to see Bonnie Parker than Clyde Barrow, although Clyde also did have a good following. So Bonnie Parker's funeral was held on Saturday, May 26th, 1934, just 3 days after they were shot to death. She was buried the following day in Northwest Dallas at Crown Hill Memorial Park. It's estimated that 40,000 to 50,000 people lined up to see her body. That's insane to me. That's a lot of people.
Why would you let that? Why wouldn't you have a private, I don't know.
Maybe
That's crazy.
if it's like their last wish, you know what I mean?
I mean, that doesn't surprise me with like the whole pictures of Bonnie like coming out. Like, I don't know. People were fantasized that a woman was like smoking a cigar, which she claims she never smokes cigars. She wants that air cleared. But she was smoking cigars, holding guns, and making out with her boyfriend on camera. Like, wild child.
In fact, so many people attended the funeral that the family themselves had trouble reaching the gravesite.
That's insane.
Yeah. So Reverend Andrews and the funeral director, Alan Campbell, led Bonnie's funeral. Clyde's funeral was held one day before Bonnie's on Friday, May 25th, 1934. So Clyde is buried in West Heights Cemetery in Dallas next to his brother, Buck. It's estimated that 30,000 people came to see his body at the Sparks Holtz brand funeral parlor and or attended the funeral. So, just a little bit less. 30,000 people still.
Crazy.
What? So Emma Parker attended Clyde's funeral but said nothing. And the same is true for Clyde's parents, who stood next to Bonnie's mother, but the families did not appear to speak to one another.
That's interesting.
But yeah, so they were there. I guess they were there to support
each other. I don't know. That's weird.
Or just mourn the loss of their children. If she hated
Clyde so much, why would she go? Maybe just to show face for the newspapers and stuff.
Or like out of respect for her daughter. Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe her daughter would have wanted her to go. Bonnie also received a great many flowers from admirers, including flowers sent from John Dillinger and Pretty Boy Floyd, as well as from Dallas newspapers.
Crazy.
Clyde's funeral included a visit from a famous comedian at the time, Burt Wheeler, who took time to sign photographs at the funeral.
You gotta get it when you can get it, I guess.
All right, so some wrap up here.
So the posse, in the aftermath, the police faced some criticism for not calling out a warning before they opened fire on the couple, which is something Jess and I have debated back and forth while researching this.
Yup.
Because I think they should have at least, given them a warning. I don't know, to just open fire, crazy.
Yeah, I could definitely see both sides, because I do think in general, yes, you should always give warning. You should always do warning shots and whatever.
However, it's Bonnie and Clyde.
Can we throw I was just thinking, are there tire spikes invented?
I don't think they were invented back then, no.
See, that's the thing, is throw up some tire spikes, because they've literally blown past barricades before.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
But according to the officers, they were determined to not give the pair a chance to escape or fire back at the lawmen. So, I guess. Anywho, the posse never received the promised bounty on the perpetrators. So they were told to just take whatever they wanted from the confiscated items in their cars. So, allegedly. I don't know if this is true or not, but it is kind of true. Because Hammer appropriated the arsenal of stolen guns and ammunition, plus a box of fishing tackle under the terms of his compensation package. Another officer claimed Barrow's saxophone from the car, but he later returned it to the Barrow family because he felt guilty. So,
crazy.
Posse members also took other personal items such as Parker's clothing. The Parker family asked for them to give it back, but they refused, and then the items were later sold as souvenirs.
Wow.
Crazy.
Absolutely crazy.
Disrespectful.
First of all, so they I'll say committed murder. They murdered people and then they weren't paid for it. I wonder if they weren't paid for it because of the way it happened.
Maybe because they didn't give the warning. Who knows? Might have been
Maybe.
like a
I don't
bunch of political.
Yeah, I don't know.
Blah blah blah.
So, gonna dive into the car a little bit, okay, the death car. So, did you know there's still blood on Bonnie and Clyde's death car? Although it has faded over time, the blood is still there. It is amazing that the car is intact and barely touched by the hand of time, especially considering that the vehicle was first sent on tour to various amusement park and circuses.
That's crazy to me. That's so crazy.
In the 1970s, it was located at a Nevada racetrack where people were allowed to sit in the car and take photos for $1.
No, stop.
So currently, the infamous death car, a 1934 Ford V8, is located in the lobby of a casino near the state line of California and Nevada. There are a trio of casinos in this location, and the car was moved from casino to another over the years. Currently, Bonnie and Clyde's car is now located at the Prime Valley Resort and Casino. So the car's paint has faded as well as the blood stains, obviously, despite being placed inside of a glass enclosure and being indoors in the air-conditioned buildings. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of that happened before when it was being paraded around the United States.
Right. Yeah.
And people are sitting in it. What? There are a pair of mannequins depicting the couple along with Clyde's blood-stained shirt signed by his sister as being authenticated.
I'm like, okay, have the car, sure, fine. But like mannequins with his authentic bloodstained shirt, that's, I think, a little too far. Let's not.
So there are 112 police bullets in the vehicle itself, with more lodged in the bodies of the Notorious duo. Whiskey Pete's Casino, part of the chain of casinos belonging to the Prim Group, purchased the vehicle in 1988 for $250,000, which in today's money is about $641,000.
Crazy.
It's an expensive car. All right, almost done.
Almost. So we know how Bonnie and Clyde's story ended, but how did everybody else's story end? Because in my opinion, they all received the sweet justice of karma. Let me get into it.
Let's go.
In February 1935, Dallas and federal authorities arrested and tried 20 family members and friends for aiding and abetting Barrow and Parker.
Wow.
This became known as the harboring trial, and all 20 either pleaded guilty or were found guilty. The two mothers were jailed for 30 days. Other sentences ranged from 2 years imprisonment to 1 hour in custody. So
just 1 hour. You're good.
After the deaths of the leaders of the Barrow gang, Ivan Methvin's son Henry was pardoned in the state of Texas.
Well, that's why he tricked him.
But he was arrested in Oklahoma and received a death sentence, which was later converted to a life sentence.
Oh, that was some tricky shit. Yeah, we'll pardon you in Texas. Sure. After spending
12 years in jail, Henry was released and later hit and killed by a train. Yeah, so Blanche was permanently blinded in her left eye during the 1933 shootout at Dexfield Park. She was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison and served 6 years of that sentence before being released on good behavior. She lived crime-free for the rest of her life, but died from cancer at age 77. Barrow cohorts Hamilton and Palmer, who escaped Eastham in January 1934, were recaptured. Both were convicted of murder and executed in the electric chair at Huntsville, Texas on May 10th, 1935.
Okay.
As you can see, nobody's getting a happy ending here.
No.
So WD had left Bonnie and Clyde 6 weeks after the three of them evaded officers at Dexfield Park in July 1933. He reached Houston and got a job picking cotton, where he was soon discovered and captured. He was returned to Dallas, where he dictated a confession, in quotations, in which he claimed to have been kept prisoner by Bonnie and Clyde. One of his many lies were he would like hype up the sex life of Bonnie and Clyde. Like he would say like they would do it in front of us, or like I don't know exactly what he said, but he would he would like that's why we get like we have the such they were so sexually involved or whatever, because he would like say that.
Okay.
He was convicted of the murder of Doyle Johnson and served a lenient sentence of 15 years.
Okay. Well.
However, He was killed on August 4th, 1974 in a misunderstanding by a jealous boyfriend of a woman whom he was trying to help.
Oh no.
So literally that's why I said karma caught up with every single one of these
one
members.
of them.
Yeah.
Wow. Alrighty, so wrap it up. Bonnie and Clyde's story became bigger than it ever could have known and is still a popular topic today. I mean, truly like a popular Halloween outfit is to be Bonnie and Clyde. You know what I mean? Like it's still romanticized. Their story inspired many movies, songs, and episodes for television. And what's crazy to think about is just how young they were. And maybe the reason that their crimes never really amounted to any kind of profit. That and the fact that Clyde only ever had one mission in mind, and that was revenge on Eastham. It is also astonishing that they did all of this, their crime spree, in only a span of 2 years. Though their life wasn't exactly glamorous like people like to think, Bonnie loved it. Newspaper clippings of themselves would be found in many of their abandoned cars. And although it wasn't exactly the way she wanted, Bonnie's face would be on the big screens before the films. So a dream come true, truly. It's understandable why Bonnie and Clyde were considered posers by other outlaws. They were just kids. But that doesn't diminish the impact that their short lives had and still have on the country.
And that's Bonnie and Clyde.
The story of Bonnie and Clyde. Wow. Wow, that's so crazy. Okay. That's it for this episode. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to follow us. Leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube. Hi, make sure you like and subscribe. 50 episodes, guys. Ha! It's so many. Did you ever think we would get here?
I don't know.
So when we started this, like, did you think like it was gonna be like a 50th thing? Like we would stick with it?
I had hoped. I had hoped.
Yeah, I feel like I really wanted to.
But I had, previous experiences where, so I didn't go in with high expectations.
Okay, but they just happened, and here we are.
Yeah. You can always find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok with our username at TTATA Podcast. And in the bio of all of our social media is our link tree, which has our email. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, topic ideas, hit us up. Let us know. And I did that off of memory. Are you proud of me?
I am so proud of you. I had to pull up the outro just because I might be able to do it from memory, but like I don't really trust myself. So thanks for listening, guys. Next week we are going to be covering cults. And if my plan is correct, our cults are always beefy, so I think we're going to split it up into 2. It's going to be great. Be there. No idea what I'm doing. Just be there. And with that, we're going to leave you with this inspirational quote.
Once you face your fear, nothing is ever as hard as you think.
Ooh.
By Olivia Newton-John.
Look at that. Love her. All right. That's beautiful. Face your fears, guys. It's not as scary as you think. Unless it's like a real fear, like bungee jumping or skydiving.
Or
I feel like
cave scuba diving.
Yeah, like I feel like those fears are there for a reason. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like if it's like daily living fear, then you got it. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Bye.